Now, let's think about all that had taken place in your own evolution of the kind of music you liked, adding elements of progressive and say modern jazz and all kinds of other things. And then what specifically motivated the reunion of alternative communication and what you thought were your goals in 2019 compared to the last time you had set down the instruments as a trio?
Well,
You probably get three separate answers for this one.
Great. That makes it better.
Brian and I had been doing a bit of recording as Not for Pussies,
Right.
and we kind of really valued David's opinion, and you were always one of the first people that got to hear what we were up to. And then we just kind of seemed to be discussing more music together and things. And then suddenly, I can't remember the exact point, but we kind of, well, for me, it was curiosity. It was like, wow, what would it be like?
I think it was like Peter Hamill at the Union Chapel. You know, one of these things where Peter Hamill and Guy Evans get together, and suddenly, you know, Jackson's on the stage, and you know,
Right.
it was kind of inevitable that it was kind of going to happen.
Very romantic version.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously it wasn't Union Chapel, but you know, it was kind of inevitable, I think, that we were going to try to do it. And I think what was remarkable, because there's, you know, you're talking about a long period of time.
Yeah.
We've all been listening to different music. When we first went into the room, we decided we'd come along with some ideas and we'd see what had happened. And David just had a basic theme, which became the last song on the Three Body Problem, resolving the three body problem. And we found that within half an hour, we were doing what we did before, which was somebody would have a theme, another. We've always had this
sort of weaving.
Yeah, I suppose a bit like prog, you know, like Crimson and people like that. Parts that kind of complement each other, unusual rhythms, interweaving instruments. And so we were very quickly doing that, and we very quickly got into enjoying doing that.
Yeah. I remember looking across the music room and seeing you, and you were just grinning.
Always grin.
Is it fair to say that during the intervening time frame you had all been making more or less simultaneous updates in what you were listening to from multi-track recording perspective, from recording studio equalization perspective, from the kind of instruments you were using? Was there anything that came way out of left field from any of the three of you that kind of had to be integrated into that, or are you all kind of marching along more or less in step?
I came at it from a probably slightly different angle by the time we got back together again, because Brian Jeanette had continued once they got your recording equipment set up in their house. They started recording under the Not for Pussies name. I'd lived in Dundee for a while, and a neighbour there. There's a long story as to why I got in touch with him, but he was quite a computer expert and introduced me to computer music software. There was a program called Logic that he was using then, and he was very kindly, when I moved across to Fife, where I stay now, he very kindly came over, and I don't know what he did, and this probably shouldn't go on the record, but he managed to get me a copy of Logic without having to pay for it.
I think everybody does.
and that meant when the upgrade,
remain nameless.
when the upgrade came to Cubase, I was able to just press a button and get Cubase as well, which is great. So I was busy doing purely electronic stuff, which is ironic because when we were all together as students, I was the one that was against the drum machine and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
I ended up doing purely electronic stuff on my own. And when we got back together again, that was something that Brian Jeanette had really had less experience of. So I suppose that's maybe the kind of other angle that I brought in, maybe they didn't expect, I don't know.
Yeah, we were using digital recording, our Studio Pro Tools, but in a very
audio way.
Yeah.
So
recording.
we were recording
live,
just like a tape, really. So we would play. So what you would do is Jeanette would plug in our bass and play a bass line, and it would go on as if it was going on to tape. We wouldn't. Whereas David would come in and say, "Oh, I wonder if that should be an oboe," or something like that, and press a button, and it would be an oboe instead. So realizing that you could manipulate sound in these kind of DAW type contexts is very different from what we were doing. And I think
It's been a really
we've kind of
interesting
brought
marriage.
these things together. And I think this album actually probably that's really obvious.
This one more so.
Oh
I
yeah,
think
yeah.
the previous one, World on Fire, was the one that probably set that off, that having MIDI and audio running together, which every other band in the world will be doing quite routinely, but that was our first go at it. Which meant in practice I had to then take that one away and do the mixing, which was a big threat to Jeanette. So all these vocal lines that Brian would normally deal with, and she had to hand them over to me. So much to her credit,
Really
she let me do it.
Well, that raises an interesting question about what happened between Three Body Problem and the new album, in the sense that you had looked at a variety of methods for collaborating face to face in one studio versus sharing recordings and mixing appropriately. And then smack dab in the middle, COVID happens, everyone has to be isolated, and all of a sudden a lot of bands are doing the same thing you had done, just as a remote distance issue. How did you make a decision to try to do more face to face for this I want to say the new album or the second album since the reunion, or had you found methods that worked remotely that you could then apply to the new?
I think as far as the Three Body Problem goes, we were expecting to work and record together.
Yeah.
And then COVID
arrived.
hit.
Yeah,
Right,
COVID,
right.
like halfway through the second piece that we'd done.
Yeah.
Right.
So that made it become a remote sharing thing.
I think what it did do, though, the second album, we made a set of rules. We decided that there were tensions that were created by the way that we were trying to record. So we were kind of wishing that we were in a room recording, but in fact we were doing it at arm's length, and it meant, I think, there was more tension. And what we decided,
tension, Dr. Gibb.
Well, it had to be handled, and it wasn't necessarily as constructive as it could be. But what we decided with the second album was that we would actually all bring a piece of music which we would take the lead for.
Right.
So the original idea was there would be 6 songs, 2 songs each. And that person would be the lead for that piece. So they might bring a theme along, present it to the rest of us. We'd all kind of put our own in, but then that person would take all those files back to their home computer and do stuff to them, turn them upside down, turn them inside out, make it into an oboe, do whatever they do.
He didn't make me into an oboe.
And then it would come back. So that we decided to do that, and there was a kind of absolutism about it, in that if there was a disagreement, the person whose song it was
had the final
say. Had the kind of casting vote, if you like. So we all kind of had to accept that, and we started that way. And our intention was to have a band song that we would produce all together.
Right.
In fact, we tried to do that, and it grew into something else, which is probably going to be project number 3.
So that was kind of separated from Afterword. Yeah.
Yes, it is now. Yeah.
Yeah, and that actually proved to be really good fun again, just being in the room all together with our instruments. Having done a bit of preparation, but mucking around the 3 of us together. And there's this kind of quite interesting thing that's now sitting on a shelf, waiting to be the launching pad for the next project.
There is a certain amount of, Brian used the word tension. There is a certain amount of mysterious but very percussive quality to a lot of the Afterword songs, Ronan, etc., that leaped ahead of Three Body Problem in creating that kind of very thin, sizzling wire type idea that you might find in the Lark's Tongues Red type period of Crimson, people like that. Was that consciously there? Do you think it was a result of making it through COVID that you all felt a little bit more edgy in regard to the music, or did that kind of just arrive spontaneously?
I'll start with that. I don't know what happened there. That we had this idea of these 6 pieces with each of us taking charge of one of them, and I think if you know us, you could probably tell which piece is which.
Mhm.
But if you don't know us, it's much more cohesive than you might expect it to be.
Well, the result was, yeah, right.
And that was unexpected, and I don't really know why that happened. But my theory is that we got into quite a nice groove of trying to shock each other.
Ah,
So I would fire my original idea off to Brian Jeanette, wait for a couple of weeks, and then, oh my goodness, this all this stuff came back that I really wasn't expecting, and it was exactly the same the other way around.
Yeah.
And maybe that became a game, but it was quite fun.
It was a lot of fun, and I definitely I know that my default position is to write sweet little lyrical song type things,
mhm.
and these guys stopped me doing that, which is really good. It's good for me. So I was just pushing the boat out with the
Yeah.
vocals, and I can't stop myself doing the nice singy bit, but still. With a lot of the harmonies, I was having great fun going for discords,
Oh, yeah.
and the bass as well. And sometimes the piano, other instruments. But it felt like we were really kind of throwing down a challenge to each other, and each of us was picking it up and running with it.
Jeanette, that raises an interesting question that, it starts out being the corniest question in the world, but there's really something behind that, in the sense of, did the lyrics drive you to a certain musical environment or vice versa? Here, some of your lyrics are challenging a lot of, borderlands and problems with the migrants and, a lot of different things that you hadn't dealt with before, and the music fits it ideally. So I'm wondering, how much of that was you came up with specific lyrical ideas that drove the music, or whether the music created tension?
I think, except for one of my songs, Quest,
Mhm.
the music came first,
Right.
and then I would hear bits where I think, oh, I could sing over that.
Mhm.
But I was definitely in a place after lockdown, and that whole period became quite a somber period for me because we lost several good friends,
Yeah.
and sudden unexpected
Oh,
deaths.
yeah.
And that really kind of hit me and made me think a lot about part of the train of thought. I mean, minutes before we came on, I heard of another friend who's died.
Oh,
So it's sobering stuff when you get to this age. And what it does for me is, what I did in the lyrics was I kind of expanded it in that I put myself in the shoes of, in one of the songs, a good friend whose wife died suddenly. What the hell would I do in that situation? And how would it feel? So I put myself in that place, but also in the other songs, it's made me think about people in, for example, Ukraine, but loads of places in the world that are, war zones, and how they must be dealing with it. And then the bigger picture about, how I feel about humanity, which is, it veers from, a tiny bit of hope to absolute disgust, that we can't actually be, peaceful man and not fight each other. And I think that that's something that is endemic. It's not going to go away, and
Yeah.
could be the end of humanity at some
Yeah.
point.
I mean, I think there's also, there's always
But
always
the-
like
the-
masses of tension in the air, isn't there?
Mm.
About
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
All the
There is-
time.
Yeah.
Having a conservative government in the UK, you
Republicans,
potentially having a Republican government in the
Yeah.
USA. There's lots of things which are around that feel kind of raw,
Yeah.
and I think we do produce quite hard music. I mean, I do think you're right that it's kind of it's moved up a bit, it's ratcheted up a bit for this particular album.
Definitely.
I think that's partly because we've got much more comfortable at trying to do what we always tried to do. And I think if you heard Primitive, if you listened to Primitive, you'd hear quite discordant, very, very sort of 70s crim type angular music. And I think
Played by a bunch of teenagers.
yeah, played by people who can
Right,
play it.
right at that age.
So trying to get those kinds of sounds and evoke those kinds of things. And I think in this album, when we sat and listened to it, in fact, we had the 6 songs which finished with Ronan, and we found ourselves going, Jesus, we're really going to have to have something at the end. So just a kind of safety valve of some sort to just let people land, you know. And
because one of the words Brian used for Ronan, which I hadn't thought about, but he said he thought it was brutal.
And relentless. It just goes, it just keeps going. And so Afterword was originally going to be a nice little
coda.
I mean, I said, Jeanette, it's got a wee piano thing, a wee piano coda, some lyrics, you know, we can all go home kind of thing. And even that managed, mainly through David actually, became quite dark and quite kind of, although there's a hope thing there, it's more of a breath than a kind of optimism, I think.
But if you were to end with Ronan, it would be more like a plane crash, whereas this does bring you down with tension, but brings you down to the ground in a more
Crimes of omission eat at the heart. The things we thought we could have done, but all we're left with is the here and now. The here and now is all the time we have. Will those who judge us understand our crimes when we barely understand ourselves?